I think it's always important. You know, I get a lot of documents from the whole world where people are trying to influence their government or the local government or the municipality council, something. And to be honest, most of these very thick documents are very unclear. It's very hard to understand what the person or and civil servants, they work very much the same way. They need to have a short and clear thing to work with. And you don't need to send this paper, you just need to send what you want. And you should tell them very clearly. And I see that in the world, when people stay up and say no, then suddenly, wow, yes, we have a sheet for that. Yes, that's the no sheet. Oh, yeah, good. And then the process is started. And I don't say that the war is won, but at least a small battle is won, and another one, and another one, and another one. And I feel sorry for civil servants and for politicians that gets these thick amounts of paper, and they sit there, you know, what do they actually want, you know? Okay, they want to move this antenna. Okay, we move it and then we upgrade the output power. They didn't win anything, you know. They should have said, no, we don't want the exposure. You can hang laundry on the antenna, but we don't want the exposure. That's the message,
we don't want exposure, and we don't mind to not have the mobile phone with working all day, no? Because people normally claim the antenna go out,
yeah,
still using the phone.
Of course, yeah.
That's the reason for the antenna.
Yeah. You have to be clear and credible.
Using mobile phone,
yeah.
At least you can prevent kids.
Yeah.
To say, okay, you probably don't allow advice advertising.
The first step would be
yeah.
I think
adults.
You
know, strategically I could agree, but you sound like sort of moving backwards all the time. I ask you again, what do you want? You want a microwave-free society. And also, if I could interrupt you, you should have, and you are so smart with this, you know, you should have these crucial questions. You should sort of pinpoint people. And again, like this English example, who is actually responsible for my child? And I don't accept a vague answer. I want to have a name. And that's suddenly the headmasters. Everyone in the society pressed down on the focal point. And suddenly the people being headmasters feel, do I want to harm a child? No, I don't want to. It's a moral, ethical issue suddenly, you know. You have to, I'm always thinking about, for instance, a very, very, very costly and very, very unnecessary and very stupid project when the Americans, in an enormous economical crisis, decides to put the man on the moon. And they just said, we do it, regardless of the cost and so on. And you know, when Neil Armstrong steps down on the moon, people see him, they remember there was Buzz Aldrin and this other guy up in the capsule, but they don't know the names of the 600,000 people that were employed in this project. It's like a country being employed, you know. And they just did it in spite of, they didn't have any money, they didn't have any use for it, they didn't develop anything really, it was just a huge waste of money. And therefore, I agree with you, it's not the right time, and then it is the right time. Because these are occupied with other issues, and you can sneak up to a level where the consumers suddenly start saying, by the way, there was another thing too. We not only want food and water and clean air, we also want the wireless to go away, you know.
But I'm still thinking, if you go back to 65, 70,
yeah,
the first step to stop cigarettes, take out cigarettes from society, probably, I don't know, but it were the childs, say, not allowed to sell cigarettes to under 18.
That came later. No, it was actually social divider. it early became noted that in layman terms, losers were using cigarettes and winners, they didn't. The first one to realize were the super powerful and super rich. And there has been in Sweden, for instance, several fantastic interviews with super rich people, and they have been interviewed. For instance, I remember one interview, they asked the person who is head of a huge brewery what was the best to be so very, very rich. And he said immediately, I don't have to use a mobile phone. And that's a social divider, you know. People, what? I have to. I'm working here, I must have that. But he doesn't. So that's what happened with smoking.
It's happening in another level in the bars.
Yeah.
Before a few years ago, Wi-Fi was a good thing. And now you will find Wi-Fi free bars. It begins to be a
again a social divider. The winners go to the Wi-Fi free, the losers, they are exposed.
I hope it happened with some schools.
Yeah.
But at the moment, all the schools are going pro-technology,
but not in Sweden. I repeat, Reggio Emilia, Montessori and Waldorf-Steiner schools, they say, no, not so good. Yeah. And often children going to these schools, they come from the sort of powerful, intelligent people with money. So it's a social divider already happening, and since 10, 15 years back, you know. So I feel, and I've written together with the Norwegian telecom expert, Einar Flydal, I have written a commentary which the headline is, "The war is already over." You have already won, but you just don't realize it. So don't be shy and just step up and say, now it's the time. Yeah, you know,
that's something that should be implemented.
Yeah, and you know, when you buy a package of cigarettes, it says smoking can kill you.
Yes, the same. Yes.
You know, when you buy a mobile phone, maybe it should say the microwaves used for telecommunication may give your child cancer.
Yes.
So,
or
and
on the contrary, this device
is safe.
Does not. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, coming back to this Nokia consumer electronics, in Sweden, the trade unions had, together with a lot of experts, come up with this initial safety standardization of computer screens. And then Nokia Consumer Electronics in Sweden, they looked at this, and you know, it should be really lowered, the exposures. And they said, no, this is not good enough. We are fathers and mothers too in Finland. We've gone to go another 1,000 times below. And so they did. And therefore, today, Nokia is one of the largest computer screen manufacturers in the world, because they have such extremely low radiation standards.
And do they inform about this to the consumer? Do they give this information to the consumer where you are?
Indeed, they do on their websites and so on, you know, but in a sort of low-key that the industry, and with industry I don't only mean the manufacturers, also the operators, the insurance companies and so on, if they join forces with good scientists as well, you know, but the scientists must be independent. Completely, otherwise people will not believe if they come up with that it's safe and they are paid by the industry. No one will believe them, you know, so they must be completely independent. But that could be arranged. That's nothing peculiar, you know. And that they also decide, and I have what's the English for that? I have like a top list of the most important issues to investigate now. And one of them we talked about yesterday is fertility. And that with fresh money, people say, hey, here we have an issue. Let's once and for all investigate that. And that has been done regarding genotoxicity. It could be done with other areas as well. Because, you know, parents or adults in general, they don't bother about if it should be 2 watts per kilogram or 1 watt. they just ask you, is it safe or not? Could I give this to my child or not? That's their question. Yeah, that's it. And therefore it would be good to cover, I see it's like pieces of a cake. You have immune system effects, you have effects on biology, on fertility and so on, and to cover that and to use the best scientists that you have. I mean, Jesus Christ, we are talking about Nobel laureates now, like Thomas Lindahl. And so that's the kind of people that should be used, They're there for you, I mean, really. So we talk now about mobiles and, cables. That's also interesting because if you should rewire the society in a shielded format, I know just one of these small aircrafts I went with yesterday, they have in the order of 4,000 Swedish miles, 40,000 kilometers of cabling in them. Micro cabling. If that should be transferred into shielded format, now we are talking about money. And the world's largest cable producer is actually ABB, a Swedish-Swiss company. And they would be very happy if someone says, we need to go cable, wired, but in a shielded format. So there are money everywhere. And as you say, the telecom industry may...
You could explain something about that, like the Swedish model?
It's very simple. I could summarize it in a few sentences. In Sweden and all over the world, of course, there are people claiming health effects from electromagnetic fields, and they are called electro-hypersensitive people. And the scientific knowledge is not very firm. Very little money has been put into this. But it's really not a Swedish model. But in Sweden, it was, and again, it's so smart, it was a private person. I had met her and talked with her for many years. Fantastic, brilliant person. And she decided, and I helped her, to write a letter to the Swedish government, just asking the government for a cup of coffee, if you see what I mean. She asked, people with electro-hypersensitivity, are they included in the handicap regulations and laws? And if they are there any exceptions to these laws and regulations? And the Minister of Health and Welfare, he answered, yes, they are included, and no, there are no exceptions. All the laws and regulations apply to them. And then based upon that, the umbrella, for people with functional impairments or disabilities is the United Nations. And at that time it was called the Standard Rules from 1993. They go back actually to Nazi Germany atrocities, developed to the Standard Rules, and later on 2007 changed into convention for various economical reasons, I would say. And they are just protected. And it's a very interesting situation. So they should be made accessible to the whole of society. And there is a general realization that when you make society accessible, like in Stockholm, for instance, we have these faced-off sidewalks. So if you come in a wheelchair, you can easily go up and down on a street. And I have a place where I often wait for my wife. There is such a sidewalk there, and I've never seen a person in a wheelchair, but I've seen thousands of bicycles, baby prams, shopping carts, and so on. And that's interesting because the United Nations have realized that if you make society accessible for people like in wheelchairs, everyone gains from that. And if we use that thinking, if we make it accessible for electro-hypersensitive people, maybe people will not get cancer. Not in a really professional way, I would say, but semi-professional. And if you don't listen to and help people immediately when they talk about their electro-hypersensitivity, the cost will go up 10 times for society. Also smart. If you listen to the person claiming a functional impairment, you will have a tenth of the cost not listening. And again, it's, now we are not talking about science, we are talking about common sense. Because this person will not give up. They will come back and come back and come back, Costly. And, Sweden, again, coming back to this change of the United Nations from the standard rules to the convention was based upon that the UN looked around in the world and they got pretty angry because they saw that countries like Sweden and other very rich countries, we were talking about a lot of accessibility measures, but we were not doing very much. And therefore they said, no, this is not good enough. We must change it to convention. And with the convention, the UN can fine economical fines. And we're talking about huge amounts of money. A country could have to pay like hundreds of millions of Swedish crowns, So it's a huge fine you can end up on. And of course they are right. I mean, Sweden can do a lot more. Countries like in Africa, some of them are so very poor, you cannot really sort of ask them to do a lot. But legally they must, in the long run. Zimbabwe must be accessible to people in wheelchair too. Maybe not today, but in a few years' time, they have to.